Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, December 10th, 2025. And today we are talking about mulch papers. That'll make sense in a minute. Winter farm hygiene and alfalfa hay. So let's do it. All right, happy Wednesday to you all. No interview for you this week as we catch up on Patreon questions, but we have a fun list of topics. Fun because you all chose them. First, though, how is everyone's week going? Slow? Cold? Warm? Here we are definitely leaning more towards cold and slow, more and more cold, in fact, with a high of 19 degrees, that's -7 Celsius, and a low of 7 whole degrees called for on Sunday. That's around -14 degrees Celsius. I don't know that this is the coldest December yet, but it's certainly been a very cold December so far. I remember some cold Decembers in my years, but I certainly cannot remember a time when we hit single-digit temperatures in mid-December. That seems unusual. There have been several years lately where we could harvest out of the fields well into December with just a little row cover. This year, definitely not so much. That is not happening. Now, to be clear, I never tempt fate and plant assuming that I will be able to harvest out of the fields in December because it can get cold and snowy. It usually just doesn't quite like this. Thanks for the reminder, though, weather. Appreciate that. All right, so as I said at the top, we are trying to catch up a bit on our Patreon questions. So we will take 3 questions today and 3 tomorrow, and that should catch us up pretty good, honestly. But also, don't hesitate to get your questions in Patreon members. I will handle the catch-up part, not Ketchup, but like catching up. I will handle that part. You all just handle the queries. All right, so first up today, and as a bonus, this one pertains to mulch. This question is from Patreon member Patrick O'Connor, who writes, quote, "The cardboard mulch discussion was good. What do you make of U-line tools of cardboard or craft paper? A lot of us use that. I have a soft spot for Weed Block Plus, if you can keep it from blowing away," end quote. All right, so great question here and fitting to our mulch series, so appreciate that. Plus, I know a lot of people use the large brown rolls of craft paper and etc. for weed protection, so let's talk about it. To start, I don't see anything wrong with craft papers and that sort of stuff in terms of contamination risks. As long as it's not glossy and does not have inks, they are technically fine. The question of whether we should be buying paper versus using, wasted cardboard is perhaps a bigger question, but yeah, it's technically okay to use, and we have used it in the past ourselves. Where it may run into not being fine is if you are certified organic, which requires any paper that you use to be recycled paper. Now, to be clear, from what I can tell, a lot of the stuff sold in these big rolls is recycled, so you would be good to go even on that front. Just make sure to double check with your certifier, but you do have to check it out and make sure that it is recycled if you are certified or plan to certify organic. And again, no ink, no gloss, that sort of stuff. Now, there are also things like Weed Guard Plus that are actually OMRI listed, meaning A-OK for organic production. This product is just a paper mulch that is a little thicker and designed for horticulture. Is it better than others? I don't know, but we have used it in the past to decent effect in terms of weed suppression under compost mulches. In fact, that's what we used when we set up much of our current gardens. As a surface mulch, it works okay, but like you said, the blowing away thing is real. You have to secure it incredibly well, which for most growers translates to just having it be covered by soil on the edges. Even then, though, like Patrick alludes in this question, wind will whip under the holes, like where the plants are, and tear the mulch paper to pieces. It's like 45-mile-per-hour gusts right now, and I imagine it's also like trash and recycling day in our neighborhood, so I just imagine it's just beautiful outside right now. We'll see in probably an hour or two when the sun comes up. Anyway, yeah, it will whip under those holes and rip pieces in that mulch. Such a goofball, that wind. So my preference is to use it underneath of mulch or compost to suppress weeds for a short time while that compost sort of like breaks it down and then makes that area ready to plant. Again, like cardboard, mulch papers are to me just a complementary or supplementary mulch, but not super reliable mulch on their own. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Let me know what you all feel about these products if you use them. What types? What have been your lessons or takeaways? Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, winter cleanup for a healthy crop up. Yeah, BRB.
Hey Jesse, it's Ben from Honeydew Homestead. Just a quick update. Most of the garden is put to rest. I do have some workhorses here, some garlic and some spinach, as well as some of my composters that are working hard over there in the run. But other than that, just getting ready for next year.
Today's episode is brought to you by Farm Raise.
Still struggling with your balance sheet? Your lender's asking for a balance sheet and you're stuck with a spreadsheet mess or guessing your numbers? Farm Raised Tracks takes the stress out of farm finance. With one click, you can generate an accurate, up-to-date balance sheet that shows your assets, liabilities, and equity. No accounting degree required. You'll be ready for loan applications, tax season, or just a clearer picture of where your farm stands. Join thousands of farmers using Tracks to build stronger businesses. Get 20% off with code NOTIL20 at farmraise.com for the lifetime of your membership.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmhand. Farmers who partnered with Farmhand say they grew an average of 63% this year because it's more than software. Farmhand is your business coach and assistant, helping to sell out, save time, and grow smarter with real data from real farms, shaping websites that convert, campaigns that sell, and fulfillment systems that run smoothly. Curious what that looks like? Meet the founder, Ari, at farmhand.partners/no-till and see the same insights and support the fastest growing farms rely on every week. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's second Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Fred, who asks, quote, possible topic for the wintry months, farm hygiene and disease management, tool cleaning routines, and especially controlling mosaic viruses. We had cucumber mosaic virus spread like wildfire this year, did not get on top of ripping out infected plants fast enough, and it took out our entire pumpkin crop and put a large dent in our other squash harvest. We have a tool sanitation station and some mosaic-resistant varieties of some crops, but it's still such a pain in the rear, end quote. All right, great question here, and bummer to hear about the mosaic virus. That is not a fun one to deal with. It really is, though, two kind of different questions, but as you sort of suggest here, there is some crossover between sanitation and mosaic virus prevention. So we'll just talk about both, like some sort of nerdy farm mashup. First, yes, there are some sanitation things that you can do for mosaic virus, but in general, prevention is about buying clean seeds from a reputable source, getting resistant varieties like you said you did. This is important because the good purveyors will actually test the seed for virus, and many will let you know that they have actually been tested. You may pay a little extra for that, but what's a little more money so as not to waste months of growing a plant only to have it succumb to a disease. That's probably a little bit more expensive. Next, when planting, make sure the cucumbers have everything they need nutritionally and moisture-wise. That's a big key. If they're healthy, they are less likely to attract the aphids or cucumber beetles that often bring the virus, and they are more able to fight the virus off themselves. Monitor heavily for the disease. If you see an infected plant, like you suggest there, pull it, roots and all, and dispose of it nowhere near where you want to ever grow a cucurbit. Also, if you can have a sample tested to make sure you know exactly what disease you're dealing with, that's helpful because there may be specific treatments for diseases that have the same look as mosaic, or what we could say is maybe that mosaic look. Now, on the sanitation end of things, washing any tools you used in those areas with soapy water and or isopropyl alcohol will help to not transmit the disease next season. As you said, you have a whole station for that. That's awesome. I'm not going to pretend I do that every season, but it is definitely a good idea. Additionally, any perennial weeds or cucurbit volunteers in the area should be eliminated so as not to harbor the disease or its host pests. That is done obviously like while the plant is growing, but also now here, at least in Kentucky, over winter when there is, stuff really tall around, say, like the greenhouses, that we should mow back and cut back just to make sure that it's not harboring those diseases. On a large scale, that can be quite the task, obviously, but keep, the area as clean as you can around those plants. And of course, rotate. Sometimes crop rotation can be quite the challenge, like in a tunnel or in a backyard scale where you just don't have a lot of space. But it can mean the difference between success and failure, especially with something like mosaic. So yeah, I hope there was something at least a little bit helpful in there. No easy answers, of course. Cucumbers are some of the hardest crops to grow year after year because, well, they are also one of the more inbred crops that don't always have the natural disease resistance of others. So things have to be fairly perfect from the state of the soil to the timing of the planting to the scouting of the pests and diseases. No big deal. Kind of a big deal. It's hard. They're not easy to grow. Also, wash your tools. Good reminder for that. It's a good winter project and it may prevent a little disease spread, but it's also a good idea to make sure any compost that you made or you plan to use next year was composted properly, especially if it has plant debris that could transmit the virus. In fact, in that case, I'm generally not using the compost that contains anything that maybe had disease on anywhere near where I plan to plant or grow cucurbits anytime soon. Anyway, let me know your all's experiences with this challenge, listeners. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we return, alfalfa as a mulch. Be right back. Today's mug is brought to you by Simple Soil Solutions, Mentorship and Training. Cool mug, Spiral of Soil Health.
Hello from Utah, my backyard garden. 5B or 6A, depending on the year. I've slowly been pulling grass out of my yard to build more garden beds. This is my most recent area. I planted pumpkins to help kill the grass this year, and it worked out well.
Today's episode is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. All right, back to the show. All right, our third and final Patreon question of the day comes to us from awesome Patreon member Patrick O'Connor, who you will remember from the first segment. They asked the question about paper mulches. Anyway, Patrick writes, quote, will you discuss alfalfa as a mulch? That, my fave for veggie beds. Try saying triacontanol 5 times fast, end quote. I'm not going to do that publicly, but I may try it off the air. We'll see. All right, so alfalfa as a mulch, great question. I am going to proceed assuming here that you mean alfalfa hay as a mulch and not like living alfalfa as a living mulch. The latter of those ideas I don't have a lot of confidence in, but that said, we are going to do some content soon on living mulches, so be on the lookout for that. That field is developing quite a bit, pun not intended, to the interest of many larger scale growers, but also us smaller growers. Anyway, alfalfa hay, let's talk about it. First, alfalfa, also called lucerne in metric, is a perennial legume that is quite high in nitrogen, but also other nutrients such as calcium, etc. That triacontanol word, that is a substance that was isolated in alfalfa meal and has showed promising increases in photosynthesis and production in a range of crops from rice to tomatoes, corn, various other things. Very cool stuff. Truly, in terms of a garden mulch on the literal and proverbial surface, it's hard to get better than alfalfa. Now, there are some important things to keep in mind. First, most alfalfa that is commercially available is Roundup ready, meaning it is genetically engineered to be resistant to the herbicide Roundup. Now, just because it was engineered personally doesn't really bother me, I guess, if you're, using it as a mulch, though I would be curious how the nutritional differences look between the genetically engineered alfalfa and the traditional alfalfa. Anyway, what concerns me there is when and at what levels the Roundup was applied. My understanding, and note that I do not grow alfalfa conventionally, but my understanding is that the first round of herbicide is often sprayed pretty early in the growth cycle. That round is likely to dissipate by the time you're going to use that on your garden, and then it decomposes. However, there may be a second round applied later for weed control, and that could be more persistent on the plant matter itself. So in that case, you may inadvertently be importing an herbicide to place right up against your tomato plants, which not recommended. Roundup is not as long-lived as other herbicides, but it just depends on when it was sprayed, the weather conditions, the amount of herbicide that was used, all those things. If you can find non-Roundup ready alfalfa or organic alfalfa hay, then by all means, that is quite the score. I have not really seen that in bulk locally here, though you may be able to order it in bulk from, elsewhere. Alfalfa hay is definitely a product worth investigating to see if it's available locally at a reasonable cost and with a reasonable lack of contamination risks. Yeah, so I think that is my entire thoughts on that. Love alfalfa pellets, alfalfa hay, alfalfa meal. Just got to take into consideration the herbicide risk is the big takeaway. But yeah, really, really great stuff for the garden. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Otherwise, we're going to call it a Wednesday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit, 501c3. So donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Get that end of the year tax break. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. I fell into deep. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support this work. Big thank you to everyone over there at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or sign up in the month of December, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Steve, our new microbe. Shouts, Steve, keeping the story alive. The story is back to Sleeves up there in New York City. So Sleeves is back in action again today, thanks to the Patreon signups. And he has just met a new friend, an older man who is wheeling a cart of plants around New York City. And Sleeves is kind of curious, like what he's doing. So he asks him, and when he does, the man says, "I'm gardening." Sleeves could not be more excited, right? Sleeves has, of course, always dreamed of being a gardener. The man, who goes by Sour Paul, a nickname given to him for his sort of like constantly sour look on his face, the way that he gardens is what Sour Paul refers to as renegade gardening. He tells Sleeve that no one wants to use the land they have like it should be used, so he's happy to oblige. And that day, Sleeves follows Sour Paul around, helping him fill in empty planters and sometimes not empty planters, with various plants, tomatoes and peppers and sprinklings of, onions and radish and lettuce seed, and planting some broccoli and kale and all sorts of stuff. He buries a few potatoes here and there as well. Then, as he goes, Sour Paul asks Sleeves to make notes in Sour Paul's notebook where they planted what, like what avenue, what street, whatever, so that they can maintain it all summer. And Sour Paul tells him, like, some of it, will be destroyed, though whoever owns those places will pull it out. They may even get in trouble a little bit, but also that most people don't even notice the food that's there. And that is how the summer started for Sleeves. How it went, though, that is for tomorrow on Sleeves and the Renegade Beanstalk. Like that. All right, thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you then. Bye. With all my might.